At number 10 we have Garnet, Montana, USA. If I ever go to Montana, I'm gonna stick to eating steaks and walking around in the mountains. I think I'd rather run into a full-grown grizzly before I would end up in a town filled with ghosts. Well, actually no, if I run into a ghost, the worst thing that would happen is maybe it would scare me so bad I would leave a hot dookie in my fresh jeans. But a grizzly would literally turn me into hot dookie. If you want to run into the ghost of an old miner, this is probably the best place you can go visit. Garnet, Montana was built up during the gold rush, and men from all over the land with bigger dreams than brains would travel here to try and strike it rich, finding some shiny rocks. Well, we all know that eventually the gold rush dried up and Garnet, Montana didn't have much to offer after that. Now it's abandoned unless you count for the various spirits living at the residence. It's said that at certain times of day you can hear a ghost play the piano, which is probably the friendliest thing a spooky ghost can do. Oh, a ghost is like, oh, people are coming. I better play them a good tune so they know I'm not to be trifled with. And it's a hot spot for ghost lovers from all over the world. An average of 16,000 people a year come to check this place out. Someone should take a recording of that ghost piano song so Ariana Grande can mix it up and make a cool Halloween tune over it. At number 9 we have Hashima. Hashima is an island off the coast of Japan that used to be one of the most densely populated places on the planet. In the mid to late 1900s, it's thought that there were over 5,000 people living per square kilometer. The island was a hotspot because of the major underwater coal mine. Nothing like living next to a coal mine to really strengthen your lungs. It was a booming place until 1974 when the coal mine was gone. After that, people started to leave the island in troves. Now the entire place is deserted and there's just a shell of a city. It's almost scary to look at, like it resembles something out of an apocalypse movie. For years it was forbidden for people to visit the island, but now you can do tours in select areas. The ghost stories go deep as well. My favorite is of a little girl dressed all in white who stands on the beach. No one knows what she's looking for, but people think that her family abandoned her on the island because they couldn't afford to raise her. Now her ghost waits on the shore for her family to come back. That is sad. At number 8 we have Butugaichag in Russia. The story of this town is probably the worst fate you could ever meet. Between the years of 1945 and 1955, this place was a labor camp. So if you were arrested back then, they might send you up to this place to work in a mine. Now what was in this mine? Uranium! And what is uranium? Radioactive. And what do radioactive things do to human cells? Well, they rip them apart and you die one of the most painful deaths imaginable. It's thought that over 400,000 prisoners died at this camp from the terrible conditions. Working in the mine would literally cut your life expectancy down to months. And the land was previously thought to be cursed. When it was originally found by nomadic tribes, the herd of deer died from eating the grass there. We now know that was uranium poisoning. Now it's said that the place is plagued by the thousands of souls who experienced horrible, slow radiation sickness deaths. The town is now shut down and you could go there if you want to die in a few months, but I would probably stay away. At number 7 we have Bodie, California, USA. When we're talking about ghost towns, you can bet we're gonna cover a lot of places that used to be packed with shiny rocks, especially in America. If you were in the USA back in the 1800s and you weren't trying to dig up a bunch of rocks, then what were you doing? You were a huge nerd. What, did you spend your time trying to figure out a cure for smallpox? Get out of here, you dork! Well, Bodie is a big-time gold rush town. It's estimated in the late 1800s, Bodie was the second largest town in all of California, with around 7,000 people. It really didn't take a lot to be a metropolis back then. You just needed a well, a good saloon, and then you were set. The gold deposit was found by the patriarch of the Bodie family. He didn't get to enjoy his findings though, because he died in a blizzard not long after. His family built the town and then named it after him. It's said that his ghost still haunts the land. Probably because he's so salty he never got to get rich and fat off his findings. You can visit this town. It's known as one of the best preserved ghost towns in all of America. Because of the dry climate, the buildings are in great shape. At number 6 we have Oradour-sur-Glane, France. This ghost town is the site of one of the many horrible acts carried out by the Nazis. In 1944, everyone in the town was forced into buildings by Nazi troops. These buildings were then set on fire and anyone who tried to run for safety was shot. Out of the several hundred people who lived here, only 7 people survived. How did they do this? Well, they had to cover themselves in the dead bodies of their friends and family. Now the town has never been repaired. It stands as a symbol to remember those who lost their lives in the brutal attacks by the Nazis. And paranormal investigators have visited the site, and they say it's plagued with tormented spirits. If you know anything about World War II history, you know that this isn't even scratching the surface when it comes to the horrific crimes committed by the Nazis. At number 5, we have Pyramida in Russia. This place used to be the most northern coal mine in the world, and even though it's cold as hell there and only 1,000 people live there, it was still an area under constant development. There was a hospital, schools, and a recreation center built for all the people who lived there. Throughout the 80s and early 90s, it was thought that this town would continue to grow and eventually become a winter hotspot. But the mine eventually dried up in the late 90s and everyone had to pack up and take off. The town was completely abandoned until the late 2000s when tourists started heading up there to bring a little more life to the area. Now there's 20 residents who live there only in the summertime to work at the town's only hotel. This place isn't really high on my lists of must visits. I think I'm gonna hit up Turks and Caicos and get drunk on a beach before I freeze my toes off in a former coal mining town. Also, if you do plan on visiting this winter wonderland, the only hotel in town is said to be haunted. Strange noises can be heard at night, and a tall black figure has been said to walk around the perimeter of the building. At number 4, we have Helltown, Ohio, USA. What a wonderful name. I heard they have an amazing cotton candy store and none of the schools have demons in them. Well, Helltown is a focal point of many conspiracy theories. The land was bought by the government years ago and all the people living there were told to leave. Speculation is this happened because there was a chemical spill and the government didn't want to admit their massive screw up. Now the town is left untouched, but there are rumors that there is a giant mutated beast created by the chemical spill that walks around the area. Not really haunted, but a giant monster's in the same vein. At number 3, we have Pripyat, Ukraine. If you guys are part of the most amazing top 10 family, then you probably know I put this place on a lot of lists, but it's hard to pass it up. Pripyat is the closest city to the Chernobyl nuclear plant, and it's no wonder why it's a ghost town. Turns out people don't like dying an irradiated death. The disaster happened back on April 26, 1986, and it wasn't long after that that everyone started running in the opposite direction. Now vegetation has taken over most of the town, but there are a few residents who have returned. But why is it haunted? Well, there is the Black Crow of Chernobyl, also called the Black Demon, Winged Creature, and many other names. It's said that this thing was seen on the day of the explosion, and some people believe that the demon himself caused the reactor to explode. Now the beast stalks the land, waiting for, I guess, another power plant to be built. I don't know what it wants. At number 2, we have Port Arthur, Tasmania. There are a few places in history that you can call hell on earth, but this is definitely one of them. Port Arthur was once the site of a brutal English prison. The worst criminals in Britain were exiled to this island, and it wasn't anything like getting sent to Club Med. I can promise you there wasn't a mojito in sight. The British government would practice psychological experiments on the inmates, and this was back in the 1800s, so you can only imagine lobotomies and other horrific practices were performed there. The living conditions were so horrible that inmates would kill each other so they could get the death penalty. I mean, you could cut out the middleman and just kill yourself, but to each his own, I guess. Now you can go on tours through the abandoned prison, and I don't think I need to explain to you why this place is haunted. And number 1 on our list is Poveglia, Italy. For our number 1 spot, we've picked a place that has centuries of grotesque history to go along with it. In the mid-12th century, this island was used as a place to dump people who were dying from the plague. Thousands of bodies were burned on this island, and going to the island was non-optional. If it was suspected that you had the Black Death, they sent you, and you stayed there until you suffered to death from this horrible sickness. After all this plagueness was done, it was a pretty chill spot until 1922 when a mental institution was built on the island. It's said that the head doctor would perform terrible experiments on all the people. He later went mad and killed himself. The shell of the institution still stands, and you can go visit it if you want. Also, fun fact about the island, it's said to be very haunted, and there were so many people burned on the island that the soil is 50% human remains. But that's probably just an urban legend. Who knows?
Starting off at number 10, the Shanghai Tunnels in Portland, Oregon. Portland was one of the most dangerous ports in the United States during the early 1900s 19th century, and it was the epicenter of Shanghai, a form of human trafficking. It's crazy to think human trafficking still happens today, and tunnels are still the way to do it. According to the local lore, swindlers preyed upon unsuspected men in the local salons, which were often outfitted with trapdoors that deposited the victims directly into a network of underground tunnels. These men were supposedly held captive, drugged, and eventually transported to the waterfront, where they were sold to ships as unpaid laborers. Some worked for several years before finding their way back home. The tunnels are said to be haunted by the aggrieved spirits of the captives who died in the dark recesses behind the city. Random fact: the practice of kidnapping men to work on ships came to be known as Shanghai because the ships that were sold to were often headed to East Asia. Number 9. Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The castle-like Eastern State Penitentiary took solitary confinement to whole new levels when it was built in 1829. Prisoners lived alone, exercised alone, and ate alone. When inmates were left in a cell, a guard would cover his head with a hood so he wouldn't be seen. The prison had to abandon its solitary confinement system due to overcrowding from 1913 until it was closed in 1970. Although the forms of punishment did not get any less severe, chaining an inmate's tongue to his wrists, that's just one example, a true story. The site's one of most haunted places in America right now. Well, it welcomes thousands of visitors every year, both for its museums and annual Terror Behind the Wall celebration, which features 6 haunted attractions within the prison walls for Halloween. When you talk about attraction inside of a prison, no thanks. Well, it was reported paranormal happenings have included dismembered laughter, shadowy figures, and pacing of footsteps. Sorry, I thought I was hearing footsteps behind me right now. Okay, I'm pretty freaked out with this one, so let's move on to the next one. So next up, number 8, we have House of the Seven Gables, Salem, Massachusetts. Now, this house did not steal its name from the classic novel. In fact, it inspired the novel itself. Salem is known for its history of the famous witch trials, and that's where Sabrina Spellman lived, but it happens to be the birthplace of Nathaniel Hawthorne, who used this 17th century house as inspiration for his famous 1851 novel, The House of the Seven Gables. Aside from its beautiful yet spooky facade, the house is surrounded by paranormal activity and ghost sightings, all based on personal experiences of staff. Every October, the house offers spooky tours as well as weekly performances of 2 plays, The Legacy of the Hanging Judge and Spirit of the Gables. Would you guys see a play in a haunted town's haunted house? Coming in hot at number 7 on this list, the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park. If you've read or seen The Shining, you know the feeling of this often snowbound hotel. It's the location Stephen King based his Overlook Hotel upon. It may not look like the film unless you watch the 1990s made-for-TV movie version, which, yeah, I don't think anyone has. Just walking to your room can drain you. So one stiff drink might have you seeing ghosts, or a couple kids chanting, "Red rum, red rum." Number 6, we're bringing you Red Onion Saloon, Skagway, Alaska. Established in 1898 as a brothel for miners during the Klondike Gold Rush, Alaska's Red Onion Saloon, it had a feature that set it apart from other bordellos. It used dolls to help run its business, always a good sign, right? Well, every day 10 dolls would be placed on the bar downstairs, each one representing one of the ladies working in the upstairs room. A customer would choose one of the dolls, at which point it would lay down on the bar to indicate that particular workers were occupied. When the customers came back downstairs, the doll would be returned to her sitting position to let other potential clients know that she was available. Well, fast forward to 2019, when the Red Onion Saloon still operates as a bar and restaurant, yet the dolls are still on display, and it offers tours of the upstairs rooms, which are preserved as sort of like a mixed-shaped brothel museum. As if these dolls weren't creepy enough, there were reports of Lydia, a former madame of a brothel, haunting the site, complete with cold spots and lingering spells of perfume rafting through the walls. All creepiness aside, I'm more curious about how this place got named Red Onion. They could have came up with any other name. Well, let me know what you guys would call this in the comment section below. Give me a name. Alright, we're halfway on this list. Number 5, we got RMS Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. This retired ocean liner sailed the Atlantic Ocean from 1936 to 1967. During the first 3 33 years at sea, the Queen Mary carried Hollywood celebrities like Elizabeth Taylor. Her days as a luxurious ship were short-lived. In 1939, she was stripped of her amenities and began her second life as a Grey Ghost, a World War II troop ship. At the conclusion of the war, she was restored to her former glory and traversed the Atlantic for nearly 2 more decades. On Halloween 1967, the Queen Mary departed on her last cruise, eventually docking in Long Beach, California, her final resting place. The ship is reportedly haunted by the spirits of those who died aboard, such as the young sailor who was crushed to death by a door in the engine room and a crew member who was in cabin B340. Number 4, Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast in Fall River. So this location came up on nearly every search on our quest to find this top 10 list for you guys. Well, you've likely heard of the children's rhyme Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave it to her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Well, you can not only visit the scene of that famous 1892 double homicide, you can also sleep at the Borden's home, eat their last meal, Johnny cakes of thick cornmeal pancakes and eggs, in case you were wondering, and spend the last nights in the bedroom where the bodies of Lizzie's stepmother Abigail was found. Someone who stayed there said, "I can attest, this home painstakingly furnished to look exactly as it did on the morning of the murders." Well, that will creep you right out. Better though, the 175-year-old property hosts up to 20 overnight guests, in which some of them, for some reason, it's a tradition when you go to this place, they will actually whip out a Ouija board. I mean, I'm not down for Ouija. That is a real life situation that can happen, and let alone whipping out a Ouija board in a haunted place. Finally, down to number 3 on this list, we have Crescent Hotel, Erica Springs, Arkansas. Since its construction in 1886, the Crescent Hotel has served several purposes: luxury resorts, conservatory for young women, junior college. But the strangest mark on its history came in 1937 when it got a new owner, Norman G. Baker. Baker was a millionaire inventor who decided to pose as a doctor despite having no medical training, and turned the hotel into a hospital that can cure cancer. Well, he was eventually found out and he was ran out of town, although reports say that his spirits found its way back to the site and found some otherworldly company too. The now operating Crescent Hotel is said to be haunted by at least 8 ghosts, ranging from a 5-year-old girl to a bearded man wearing Victorian clothing. 1 ghost is enough for me, never mind 8 of them, and children ghosts, I think those were the absolute scariest kind. And number 1, we have Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, Western West Virginia. This foreboding asylum began construction in 1858 and opened to patients in 1864. The massive structure was designed by architect Richard Andrews to maximize sunlight and fresh air. It was believed that the building itself would serve as a healing environment. It was designed for 250 people housed and 2,400 patients in crowded conditions. I mean, that's a pretty big range, going from 250 to 2,400. Patients were physically restrained and often given inhumane treatments such as the electroshock therapy and lobotomies, which was very popular back in the day. After more than a century in operation, the facility was forced to close in 1994, which, when you think about it, wasn't too long ago, within the last 30 years, and it was due to the reforms in mental health and treatment and the deterioration of the building. Hundreds of patients died during the asylum tenure, and scores of guests and ghost hunters have claimed they're seeing shadowy figures roaming around the facility.
At number 9, we have the Fairmont Hotel in Banff, Canada. If you have never been to Banff, it is one of the most beautiful places in the whole world. There's amazing skiing in the winter, and in the summer it turns into a lush green wonderland. If you were a ghost, this would be a paradise to haunt. The Fairmont sits on top of a mountain that looks so regal it could double as the Grand Budapest Hotel. It was built in 1888 and it was the center point to increase tourism in the area, and it worked. But like any old building, this place has adopted some guests that refuse to check out. There are 2 ghosts that are responsible for the majority of the ghost sightings, one being that of an old bellhop. He was the employee of the hotel back in the 70s, and after he kicked the bucket, he decided that retirement wasn't for him. His ghost has been been seen throughout the hotel, helping people to this day. Very few people get to do what they love. Why let a little thing like death stop you from sticking to your passion? Another ghost is that of the bride dressed all in white. The story goes that she tripped down a staircase on the day of her wedding and met a grim ending. That is a huge bummer. You're about to make it to the altar and you lose your footing. Oh, that sucks. At number 8 we have the Xunantunich Church in Beijing, China. An old mysterious building that sits in Beijing, China. There are several elements to this building that make it an intriguing place for anyone interested in the supernatural. First, no one knows who built the building or who commissioned the building to be built. Almost as if an outside force created the building. Like the devil came to town and was like, yeah, let's build a church. Also, on the front door of the building there is a note that makes it very clear that there are no ghosts inside, which is super sus. Like where I live, there's no note about ghosts because it's just a given. We know there's no ghosts. This place uses the used car salesman approach to convincing people. Yeah, that rickety noise in the back? Oh, that's just something the car makes. It's an added feature. The residence is haunted by the ghost of a young woman who killed herself by hanging during the Communist War in China. Some say she did this because her husband was killed at war, and others say she was trying to avoid capture. At number 6 we have La Château de Brisac, France. We are heading all over the world with this list, and now we're heading to a place that has a long, rich history, France. It makes sense to waltz right into a castle. Besides being one of the most glorious buildings in all of France, an exciting reason to visit this place is the spectral tourist attraction. Back during the reign of King Charles VII, he was married to a beautiful woman who he unfortunately found out was cheating on him. He wasn't too happy with this, so he divorced her, and that was that. I'm just kidding. It was the 1400s. He also had her killed for insulting his honor. That's how they did things back then. When her life ended, she was wearing a green dress. Now it's said you can see the ghost of a woman in a green dress walking the halls, moaning for her lost love. At number 5 we have Morgan House, Kalimpong, India. The estate formerly owned by the Morgans has a rather dark past. The house was lived in by Baron George Morgan and his wife back in the 1930s. Apparently Mr. Morgan would spend a lot of his free time torturing his wife. With them being in India and his wife having nowhere to go, she eventually fell into a depression. Not long after that she died. The two never had any kids, and after Mr. Morgan died, the Indian government took control of the property. It has now been spruced up into a nice hotel, but the terrors of this building's past haven't been washed away. Mrs. Morgan is free from her husband and has no interest in leaving her home. Many patrons of the hotel say they have heard her high heels walking along the wooden floors. At number 4 we have Casa Loma, Toronto, Canada. The most famously haunted place in all of Toronto. It's literally a massive castle that is a 10-minute drive from the world famous CN Tower. It's strange having a massive stone castle built in the early 20th century so close to the downtown core, but that's probably why it's so haunted. All the ghosts want to gather there because it feels like home. One of the most haunted areas of the castle are the secret underground tunnels which connect different sections of the property. There have been reports of a ghostly miner who might have died digging the tunnels, and a lady in a white dress. Also, the castle's former owner, Lady Mary Pellet, has been seen all throughout the building. Some people say they've tried to take a picture of her when she's walking through, and she will use her ghostly powers to turn off your camera. Sounds like she's not very photogenic. If you want to give yourself an extra fright, you should come check out the castle in October when they turn the whole thing into a massive haunted house. I've been, it's a great time. At number 3 we have the Hill of Crosses in Lithuania. The look of this place will make you say, oh yeah, there are for sure some ghosts in here. This hill has been the site of rebellion, respect, and remembering the dead for the past 500 years. People have come here to place crosses as a way to pay good fortune to those who died fighting for the freedom of Lithuania. This practice has made it a safe haven for spirits to walk through, and there have been reports of seances performed there trying to contact these dead heroes. There are currently over 100,000 crosses piled up on this hill. Back in the Soviet reign, they tried to destroy this holy landmark 3 times. Three times. But the Lithuanian people stood strong and came back to rebuild it every time. That's a pretty awesome story of solidarity. I know why ghosts want to hang out here. They're like, I know my home will be safe forever. At number 2 we have Cemetery Number 1 in New Orleans, USA. This place has been nicknamed the Haunted City because it is literally filled with so many graves that you could fill a small theater. There are over over 700 graves at this site. You pack that many people into one spot and you are guaranteed some strange spirits walking around. On Halloween, it must be like a massive party in there. It would be a giant ghost rave with the coolest people from the last 200 years. The grave that gets the most attention is that of former voodoo priestess Marie Laveau. It's said she had the power to influence spirits, and now even in death her ghost can gain strength from the graveyard and get the phantoms to do her bidding. I mean, that's a good skill to have after you're dead. You're like, oh, you guys, you work for me. That's how this is gonna work. And for the number 1 spot, we have the Rose Hall in Montego Bay, Jamaica. A beautiful mansion that used to be the home of the Palmers back in the 19th century. The two were a loving couple, or that's what the public thought. Mr. Palmer died one day of suspicious causes, but foul play was inconclusive. Annie Palmer took control of the property, and people weren't too suspicious until her 2 following husbands and her parents died, all without warning. Now things are getting a little suspicious. The urban legend of Annie Palmer is that she was a witch and she would use dark magic to kill her victims. It's said that her evil spirit still inhabits the Rose Hall. A witch ghost sounds pretty serious, especially one that has killed people. That's not something you want to disturb for your own entertainment, right? Well, you totally can. You can take tours of the building which highlight all the legends surrounding the witch of the Rose Hall. And if you really want to bring some bad mojo into your life, you can take part in a seance to communicate with the spirit of Annie Palmer. I think the ghost of a murderous witch isn't something I would want to hang out with.
Starting off with number 10, Wichita Falls, Texas. And surprisingly, there are a lot of haunted towns in the state of Texas. There are a lot on this list, and I feel like they probably make the record for most haunted towns in America. But either way, Wichita Falls is filled, and I mean filled, with haunting stories. There's a site in town called the Witch's Gate that used to be a mansion before it burned down in the 70s. After the man of the house died, his wife went a bit insane, turning to things like witchcraft to try and cope. She somehow burned the mansion down, killing her 2 sons with it. Another story claims the sons were robbed and it was the thief that set the house on fire. The boys haunt the area till this day, and I'm not surprised, I'd be pissed too. Another famous one is the White Sanitarium. Presently a private residence, it used to be a mental hospital in the 20s. After the place closed down, people have seen a group of men sitting around a table playing cards, perhaps the hospital's dead old staff, I don't know, but more famously they've seen a woman in nurse's clothes roaming the building. There's also Pinky's Cave, which is a 3-mile drainage ditch, and kids used to hang out there years ago, but now it's filled with eerie sounds and homeless people, as well as the ghost of a woman and her child who drowned inside the tunnel during a storm. Coming in at number 9 is Pluckley, Kent. Pluckley is a small village in Kent that was named the most haunted village in England by Guinness World Records in 1989. So I don't want to overhype it, but at the same time it clearly deserves the hype. It's said that 12 to 16 ghosts haunt the village and the surrounding areas. The list includes a screaming man who worked at the village brickworks and fell to his death. Another is a highwayman who was pinned to a tree with a sword. That tree was soon named Fright Corner, and that's where his ghost looms every day. The watercress woman is the ghost of a woman who used to sit on a bridge drinking gin and smoking her pipe while selling watercress. You'd assume she drowned in the river she sat near, but the reality was a lot more grim. It's said she dropped gin all over herself and accidentally set herself alight on the bridge. There's also the ghost of a principal who hung himself and was found by his students. On LV Farm, which dates back to 1406, there's the ghost of Edward Brett who shot himself in the dairy. His last words to his wife were, "I will do it," and that's what can be heard whispered around the farm. Then of course, if we're more generic, there's the white lady and the red lady, because make no mistake, there is always a white lady ghost in every list. That's 7 ghosts already, and that's not even the end of it. Based on the deaths in the list, I get the feeling there's like an external force in the village that made people slightly suicidal. That's the vibe I'm getting, I don't really know. At number 8 we have Savannah, Georgia. Apparently it's widespread knowledge that Savannah is the most haunted city in America, and thankfully I've never been. The town was given this title because literally every building in the town is haunted, like everyone. Every building has a story, every building has its own ghost. It's like Savannah is more for the ghosts than it is for the living. The Hamilton Turner Inn is home to the ghost of a man smoking a cigar on its roof, as well as little children. Whose children are they? God knows. Dubbed one of the best haunted hotels hotels in the US because clearly that's a real category, the Marshall House was a hotel that ended up being used as a hospital thrice in its history, and thus you can imagine all the dead patients as ghosts running around. 1790 Inn and Restaurant is the home of a scorned woman called Anna who haunts the upstairs guest rooms waiting for her lost love. But why is Savannah so haunted? Let's go back in history. The town has been the site of many atrocities. The siege of Savannah that killed 240 people left people thinking unsettled soldiers still lingered there. Savannah has also been the site of a yellow fever epidemic, so that's a lot of people dead just there. In 1820 there was a massive fire in town that destroyed 500 buildings, and there was an even bigger fire 25 years prior that destroyed half that number. The people that died in those fires have been linked to the houses they occupied. And let's not forget the countless murders that have taken place there as well. Filling our number 7 slot is Jerome, Arizona. Mining town Jerome was known as the wickedest town in the West for its brothels, gambling, and heavy drinking miners. The town itself actually burned down 3 times in 3 years at the end of the 1800s. At its peak, its population was 15,000, it then shrank to 50 people in the 50s, and currently it's 450 people. Inside the town, the Jerome Grand Hotel adds to the hauntings tenfold. Before it was a hotel, it was the United Verde Hospital where dozens of people died during the Great Spanish Influenza. Coughs, breathing, lights flicking, doors opening, a little child running on the 3rd floor either laughing or crying, it has it all. Sometimes the little ghost just stays at the foot of a guest's bed and stares at them all night. The sounds of newborn babies crying, and many guests have even spoken to the front desk about it out of concern, but then they find out it's coming from an empty room. A maintenance man named Claude Harvey was found under the elevator murdered in the 30s, and his ghost wanders around the hotel as well. There's even a ghost cat at this hotel. Can you imagine? I could go on, but I think you get the picture. Other than coming for tourism or to chase ghosts, no one really visits Jerome anymore, sadly. Now at number 6 is Helltown, Ohio. Founded in 1806 and formerly called Boston, this place used to be the oldest village in Summit County. Helltown was the victim of disappearing forest land when President Ford let the National Park jurisdiction expropriate land to make parks. The NPS started buying properties of locals in Helltown, and they were pissed. They even wrote "Now we know how the Indians felt" all over their houses, which I feel is a bit inappropriate, but either way, that was all for nothing. The plan fell through in the end and the village was abandoned. Things went wrong in 1985 when rangers visited Kredge dump nearby and left covered in rashes and sick. Apparently the dump was highly toxic because chemicals were never disposed of properly. There's also the issue of the Satanist church, equipped with upside down crosses and all. Human and animal sacrifices even took place there, and that's not all. There was even an escaped mental patient in the woods in the town that killed a bus full of children, and that bus is still there, haunted by the ghost's murdered past. There's even a mutated snake in the town known as the Peninsula Python, so it's safe to say the town lives up to its name and has way too much going on. Coming in at number 5 is Granbury, Texas. This one's a bit of a small one. In 2010 their population wasn't even 8,000, so I mean it's an intimate little town. But regardless of that, it's been the home for many infamous people over the years. Davy Crockett's wife Elizabeth moved there post the Texas Revolution, and Jesse James is even buried in the city of Granbury Cemetery. Billy the Kid apparently moved there too after faking his own death. But the biggest haunted appeal of Granbury is John St. Helen. He moved there in the 1870s to teach and would quote Shakespeare all the time. But people think John St. Helen was actually John Wilkes Booth, the man who assassinated Abraham Lincoln. Apparently he died in a bar fire and police threw Booth's body into the Potomac River. Others say he was assigned a new identity after the assassination. I mean, in town he walked with a strange limp and had a southern accent, so people were wary of him. On his deathbed he did confess to a priest that he was in fact John Wilkes Booth and told him where he could find the gun that killed Abe. But he didn't die that day. He fled the city, but it's said that when he did finally die wherever that was, he came back to Granbury. The Granbury Opera House is haunted by him now, and you can hear him quoting Shakespeare all the time. some things never change. At number 4 is Galveston, Texas. This island city's residents are so used to seeing ghosts around that honestly, they don't even bat an eyelid anymore. During the early 1900s, the city opened the Galvez Hotel to honor military leader Bernardo de Galvez, and they commissioned a giant portrait of him to go in its lobby. Soon after the Galvez Hotel opened its doors, guests started complaining this painting would make them feel extremely cold and that his eyes would just follow them everywhere. The hotel is also haunted by a ghost bride who's been seen many times in room 501. It's said she hung herself after finding out her fiancé died at sea, but to make matters worse, he didn't even die. He came to the hotel looking for her and for the marriage that would never be. There was also a storm in 1900 which is still considered the deadliest storm in US history that killed 8,000 residents. Mayfield Manor served as a morgue after the storm, and it's now haunted all year round 24/7 around the clock. Dash Beardsley does ghost tours of the city, and he said he's seen them with his own eyes. Among his many stories is one of an office in town that calls 911 every night. The police have gone there countless times to find the office empty and no telephone even connected. Another story is the ghost of a salesman who died inside Madame Harvey's brothel in the 1800s. A police chief moved his body to a park and made it look like he was, feeding pigeons, and put him on a bench so it would be less embarrassing for his family, and the man's ghost is still looking for his car keys. Filling our number 3 slot is Jefferson, Texas. That's 3 towns in Texas in a row now. I really wasn't lying when I said Texas takes the cake on this list. It's been dubbed one of the most haunted towns in the South by many travel channels, and I know it sounds like I'm saying this is one of the most haunted towns ever for every single number, but it's true. Either way, the town is plagued by the apparitions haunting the Jefferson Hotel and the Excelsior House. Let's start with the hotel. There's a staircase inside which is known to be haunted by a little ghost that likes pulling hair and tapping guests' shoulders. Guests have been locked inside their hotel rooms and bathrooms for ages before being let out, whilst hearing a creepy laughter from the other side of the door. Orbs also appear in photos taken inside the hotel, and all this isn't even scaring me, it's just making me feel annoyed for the guests who have to stay there. Not my problem. Not my problem. Anyway, the Excelsior House is another hotel that's basically just as haunted. It houses a headless ghost on the 2nd floor, so might want to avoid that, and it even houses a woman in black carrying a baby. The ghost apparently even spoke to Steven Spielberg in the 80s, and so she got closer to my dreams of becoming an actor than I have, and she's dead. Great. Now at number 2 is Kerrville, Texas. This town is specifically known for 2 haunted buildings whose ghosts seem to go all around the town all the time. The first is Kerr County Courthouse, where 2 tragedies took place. The first was to do with a couple. The man asked his beloved to marry him and she said no, so naturally in a fit of jealousy and rage he killed her and then hung himself right in front of the courthouse. Talk about unable to deal with rejection. Man up, boy. Both have been seen over 100 times at the courthouse and the surrounding area, just milling about. Honestly, I'd be so mad if I was the girl, honestly. Like I said, I didn't want to marry you, and now I'm stuck in this afterlife purgatory with you. Just my luck. Anyway, the second story involves a prisoner who was killed during a rough interrogation, and he too haunts the inside of the building by banging on the bars and throwing papers about. Now the second building is Delaney Hall in Schreiner University. From its name you can probably guess that it's a dorm building at the university, and it's haunted by 8 former students while living students still reside there. The students see doors slamming when the ghosts have fights with one another, and construction workers constantly complain about how their tools go missing because of the ghosts. And finally, at number 1 is Saratoga, Texas. The Light of Saratoga is the legend of mysterious lights appearing and disappearing on Bragg Road that all residents know. The road runs between Beaumont and Livingston and is next to the ghost town of Bragg Station. A haunted road and a ghost town? What a match made in heaven. So strange lights on roads have been featured in many other videos, so this phenomenon is nothing new. Some think it's simply swamp gas, but the most popular story behind it is that a railroad worker was decapitated during a railway accident, and the light comes from the lantern his ghost carries as he looks for his head. Honestly, if he's survived this long without his head, I don't really think he needs it. The second explanation for the lights is a ghostly couple. It said the newlyweds were on their way home on the road when they were stopped by an innocent looking man on the side of the road. However, the man was not innocent at all. He had a gun and a knife and took the man's wife hostage into big thicket forest and killed her there and then disappeared. The man was ordered to wait wait in the car till they disappeared, otherwise he'd shoot her. He waited and then ran into the forest trying to follow their sounds, but he was too late. So it said the lights on the road are him trying to find his bride's murderer. Love never dies, you guys. Your fiance may be murdered, but your love never dies.
Well, starting off at number 10, the Shanghai Tunnels in Portland, Oregon. Portland was one of the most dangerous ports in the United States during the early 19th century, and it was the epicenter of Shanghai, a form of human trafficking. It's crazy to think human trafficking still happens today, and tunnels are still the way to do it. According to the local lore, swindlers preyed upon unsuspected men in the local salons, which were often outfitted with trapdoors that deposited the victims directly into a network of underground tunnels. These men were supposedly held captive, drugged, and eventually transported to the waterfront, where they were sold to ships as unpaid laborers, aka slaves. Some worked for several years before finding their way back home. The tunnels are said to be haunted by the aggrieved spirits of the captives who died in the dark recesses behind the city. Random fact: the practice of kidnapping men to work on ships came to be known as Shanghai because the ships that were sold to were often headed to East Asia. Number 9, Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The castle-like Eastern State Penitentiary took solitary confinement to whole new levels when it was built in 1829. Prisoners lived alone, exercised alone, and ate alone. When inmates were left in a cell, a guard would cover his head with a hood so he wouldn't be seen. The prison had to abandon its solitary confinement system due to overcrowding from 1913 until it was closed in 1970. Although the forms of punishment did not get any less severe, I mean, chaining an inmate's tongue to his wrists, that's just one example, a true story. The site's one of most haunted places in America right now. Well, it welcomes thousands of visitors every year, both for its museums and annual Terror Behind the Wall celebration, which features 6 haunted attractions within the prison walls for Halloween. I mean, when you talk about an attraction inside of a prison, no thanks. Well, it was reported paranormal happenings have included dismembered laughter, shadowy figures, and pacing of footsteps. Sorry, I thought I was hearing footsteps behind me right now. Okay, I'm pretty freaked out with this one, so let's move on to the next one. So next up, number 8, we have House of the Seven Gables, Salem, Massachusetts. Now, this house did not steal its name from the classic novel. In fact, it inspired the novel itself. Salem is known for its history of the famous witch trials, and that's where Sabrina Spellman lived. But it happens to be the birthplace of Nathaniel Hawthorne, who used this 17th century house as inspiration for his famous 1851 novel, The House of the Seven Gables. Aside from its beautiful yet spooky facade, the house is surrounded by paranormal activity and ghost sightings, all based on personal experiences of staff. Every October, the house offers spooky tours as well as weekly performances of 2 plays. The Legacy of the Hanging Judge and Spirit of the Gables. Would you guys see a play in a haunted town's haunted house? Coming in hot at number 7 on this list, the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park. If you've read or seen The Shining, you know the feeling of this often snowbound hotel. It's the location Stephen King based his Overlook Hotel upon. It may not look like the film unless you watch the 1990s made-for-TV movie version, which, yeah, I don't think anyone has. I mean, just walking to your room can drain you. So one stiff drink might have you seeing ghosts, or a couple kids chanting, "Red rum, red rum." Alright, we're halfway on this list. Number 5, we got RMS Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. This retired ocean liner sailed the Atlantic Ocean from 1936 to 1967. During the first 3 years at sea, the Queen Mary carried Hollywood celebrities like Elizabeth Taylor. Her days as a luxurious ship were short-lived. In 1939, she was stripped of her amenities and began her second life as a gray ghost, a World War II troop ship. At the conclusion of the war, she was restored to her former glory and traversed the Atlantic for nearly 2 more decades. On Halloween 1967, the Queen Mary departed on her last cruise, eventually docking in Long Beach, California, her final resting place. The ship is reportedly haunted by the spirits of those who died aboard, such as the young sailor who was crushed to death by a door in the engine room and a crew member who was murdered in cabin B340. Bureau. Number 4, Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast in Fall River. So this location came up on nearly every search on our quest to find this top 10 list for you guys. Well, you've likely heard of the children's rhyme Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave it to her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Well, you can not only visit the scene of that famous 1892 double homicide, you can also sleep at the Borden's home, eat their last meal, Johnny cakes of thick cornmeal pancakes and eggs, in case you were wondering, and spend the last nights in the bedroom where the bodies of Lizzie's stepmother Abigail was found. Someone who stayed there said, "I can attest, this home painstakingly furnished to look exactly as it did on the morning of the murders. Well, that will creep you right out." Better though, the 175-year-old property hosts up to 20 overnight guests, in which some of them, for some reason, it's a tradition when you go to this place, they will actually whip out a Ouija board. I mean, I'm not down for Ouija, that is a real life situation that can happen, and let alone whipping out a Ouija board in a haunted place. Finally, down to number 3 on this list, we have Crescent Hotel, Erica Springs, Arkansas. Since its construction in 1886, the Crescent Hotel has served several purposes: luxury resorts, conservatory for young women, junior college, but the strangest mark on its history came in 1937 when it got a new owner, Norman G. Baker. Baker was a millionaire inventor who decided to pose as a doctor despite having no medical training, and turned the hotel into a hospital that can cure cancer. Well, he was eventually found out and he was ran out of town, although reports say that his spirits found its way back to the site and found some otherworldly company too. The now operating Crescent Hotel is said to be haunted by at least 8 ghosts, ranging from a 5-year-old girl to a bearded man wearing Victorian clothing. 1 ghost is enough for me, never mind 8 of them, and children ghosts, I think those were the absolute scariest kind. And number 1, we have Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, Western West Virginia. This 4-botting asylum began construction in 1858 and opened to patients in 1864. The massive structure was designed by architect Richard Andrews to maximize sunlight and fresh air. It was believed that the building itself would serve as a healing environment. It was designed for 250 people housed and 2,400 patients in crowded conditions. I mean, that's a pretty big range, going from 250 to 2,400. Patients were physically restrained and often given inhumane treatments such as the electroshock therapy and lobotomies, which was very popular back in the day. After more than a century in operation, the facility was forced to close in 1994, which, when you think about it, wasn't too long ago, within the last 30 years, and it was due to the reforms in mental health and treatment and the deterioration of the building. Hundreds of patients died during the asylum tenure, and scores of guests and ghost hunters have claimed they're seeing shadowy figures roaming around the facility.
At number 10, we have Salem, Massachusetts, USA, a town revered by the occult and has a dark enough history to make any horror fan squeal with glee. Salem, Massachusetts was the home of the 1692 Salem witch trials. This is where a massive witch hunt led to the hanging of 19 people who were falsely accused of using witchcraft. There are several spots around the town that give off an extremely creepy vibe and have reported hauntings, but the most notorious place is the former home of Sheriff George Corwin. He was the man responsible for spearheading the hunting and capturing of these witches. Not only that, but the people that were captured, he would take them into his basement and then he would torture these people until they confessed to their crimes. Now his ghost and the ghosts of several other people who were tortured by him haunt the Joshua Ward House, which is the building that sits on the land that the sheriff's house used to be on. At number 9, we have the Fairmont Hotel in Banff, Canada. If you have never been to Banff, it is one of the most beautiful places in the whole world. There's amazing skiing in the winter, and in the summer it turns into a lush green wonderland. If you were a ghost, this would be a paradise to haunt. The Fairmont sits on top of a mountain that looks so regal it could double as the Grand Budapest Hotel. It was built in 1888 and it was the center point to increase tourism in the area, and it worked. But like any old building, this place has adopted some guests that refuse to check out. There are 2 ghosts that are responsible for the majority of the ghost sightings, one being that of an old bellhop. He was the employee of the hotel back in the 70s, and after he kicked the bucket, he decided that retirement wasn't for him. His ghost has been been seen throughout the hotel, helping people to this day. Very few people get to do what they love. Why let a little thing like death stop you from sticking to your passion? Another ghost is that of the bride dressed all in white. The story goes that she tripped down a staircase on the day of her wedding and met a grim ending. That is a huge bummer. You're about to make it to the altar and you lose your footing. Oh, that sucks. At number 8 we have the Xunantunich Church in Beijing, China. An old mysterious building that sits in Beijing, China. There are several elements to this building that make it an intriguing place for anyone interested in the supernatural. First, no one knows who built the building or who commissioned the building to be built. Almost as if an outside force created the building. Like the devil came to town and was like, yeah, let's build a church. Also, on the front door of the building there is a note that makes it very clear that there are no ghosts inside, which is super sus. Like where I live, there's no note about ghosts because it's just a given. We know there's no ghosts. This place uses the used car salesman approach to convincing people. Yeah, that rickety noise in the back? Oh, that's just something the car makes. It's an added feature. The residence is haunted by the ghost of a young woman who killed herself by hanging during the Communist War in China. Some say she did this because her husband was killed at war, and others say she was trying to avoid capture. At number 7 we have the Shanghai Tunnels in Portland, USA. A Shanghai tunnel sounds like a place where you go to bet on horse racing and eat the best fried rice you've ever had in your life. But it actually used to be the epicenter for human trafficking in the United States. Located in Portland, Oregon, the tunnels are now run down and unused. Back in the 19th century, people walking through these tunnels would often be kidnapped and then sold overseas into slave labor. Some bars above these tunnels had trap doors in them, which they would use to take drunk people, slip them down into the tunnels where they would never be seen again. A lot of people died in these tunnels before they were sold off into slavery. Now it's said that their angry ghosts walk the halls. Screaming, banging, and even weeping can be heard when you pass through these tunnels. At number 6 we have La Château de Brisac, France. We are heading all over the world with this list, and now we're heading to a place that has a long, rich history, France. It makes sense to waltz right into a castle. Besides being one of the most glorious buildings in all of France, an exciting reason to visit this place is the spectral tourist attraction. Back during the reign of King Charles VII, he was married to a beautiful woman who he unfortunately found out was cheating on him. He wasn't too happy with this, so he divorced her, and that was that. I'm just kidding. It was the 1400s. He also had her killed for insulting his honor. That's how they did things back then. When her life ended, she was wearing a green dress. Now it's said you can see the ghost of a woman in a green dress walking the halls, moaning for her lost love. At number 5 we have Morgan House, Kalimpong, India. The estate formerly owned by the Morgans has a rather dark past. The house was lived in by Baron George Morgan and his wife back in the 1930s. Apparently Mr. Morgan would spend a lot of his free time torturing his wife. With them being in India and his wife having nowhere to go, she eventually fell into a depression. Not long after that she died. The two never had any kids, and after Mr. Morgan died, the Indian government took control of the property. It has now been spruced up into a nice hotel, but the tears of this building's past haven't been washed away. Mrs. Morgan is free from her husband and has no interest in leaving her home. Many patrons of the hotel say they have heard her high heels walking along the wooden floors. At number 4 we have Casa Loma, Toronto, Canada. The most famously haunted place in all of Toronto. It's literally a massive castle that is a 10-minute drive from the world famous CN Tower. It's strange having a massive stone castle built in the early 20th century so close to the downtown core, but that's probably why it's so haunted. All the ghosts want to gather there because it feels like home. One of the most haunted areas of the castle are the secret underground tunnels which connect different sections of the property. There have been reports of a ghostly miner who might have died digging the tunnels, and a lady in a white dress. Also, the castle's former owner, Lady Mary Pellet, has been seen all throughout the building. Some people say they've tried to take a picture of her when she's walking through, and she will use her ghostly powers to turn off your camera. Sounds like she's not very photogenic. If you want to give yourself an extra fright, you should come check out the castle in October when they turn the whole thing into a massive haunted house. I've been, it's a great time. At number 3 we have the Hill of Crosses in Lithuania. The look of this place will make you say, oh yeah, there are for sure some ghosts in here. This hill has been the site of rebellion, respect, and remembering the dead for the past 500 years. People have come here to place crosses as a way to pay good fortune to those who died fighting for the freedom of Lithuania. This practice has made it a safe haven for spirits to walk through, and there have been reports of seances performed there trying to contact these dead heroes. There are currently over 100,000 crosses piled up on this hill. Back in the Soviet reign, they tried to destroy this holy landmark 3 times. Three times. But the Lithuanian people stood strong and came back to rebuild it every time. That's a pretty awesome story of solidarity. I know why ghosts want to hang out here. They're like, I know my home will be safe forever. At number 2, we have Cemetery Number 1 in New Orleans, USA. This place has been nicknamed the Haunted City because it is literally filled with so many graves that you could fill a small theater. There are over 700 graves at this site. You pack that many people into one spot and you are guaranteed some strange spirits walking around. On Halloween, it must be like a massive party in there. It would be a giant ghost rave with the coolest people from the last 200 years. The grave that gets the most attention is that of former voodoo priestess Marie Laveau. It's said she had the power to influence spirits, and now even in death her ghost can gain strength from the graveyard and get the phantoms to do her bidding. I mean, that's a good skill to have after you're dead. You're like, oh, you guys, you work for me. That's how this is gonna work. And for the number 1 spot, we have the Rose Hall in Montego Bay, Jamaica. A beautiful mansion that used to be the home of the Palmers back in the 19th century. The two were a loving couple, or that's what the public thought. Mr. Palmer died one day of suspicious causes, but foul play was inconclusive. Annie Palmer took control of the property, and people weren't too suspicious until her 2 following husbands and her parents died, all without warning. Now things are getting a little suspicious. The urban legend of Annie Palmer is that she was a witch and she would use dark magic to kill her victims. It's said that her evil spirit still inhabits the Rose Hall. A witch ghost sounds pretty serious, especially one that has killed people. That's not something you want to disturb for your own entertainment, right? Well, you totally can. You can take tours of the building which highlight all the legends surrounding the witch of the Rose Hall. And if you really want to bring some bad mojo into your life, you can take part in a seance to communicate with the spirit of Annie Palmer. I think the ghost of a murderous witch isn't something I would want to hang out with. Coming in number 10, we have La Perle House. Let's kick this off like we're in a Resident Evil game and head over to a haunted mansion. Here's a good question for all of you in the comments. Would you spend a night in a haunted mansion if that meant you could keep it? I think that would be a hard no for me, because what am I going to do with a haunted mansion after I own it? I don't want to stay in it, and I definitely don't think anyone is going to buy it. Well, La Perle House is one of the most famous haunted mansions in the world, and it got its ghostly reputation for a good reason. During the Pacific War, the Japanese soldiers came through and needed a place to house some of their troops. They started to take any large building and use it as a garrison, and the La Perle House was one of the most infamous, because when another country's troops come through and then you house them, they would be really grateful for you doing such a thing, and they would treat the residents with respect. No, that doesn't happen at all. The La Perle House was a site of a ton of horrible tortures. It said that the wailing of someone being tortured to death can still be heard from the ghosts that walk the halls, and there has also been several executions that took place at this mansion. So if you want to see the head of a ghost rolling down some stairs, this would be the best place to find it. Coming in number 9, we have Clark Air Base Hospital, Pampanga. Let's jump from one war story right into another. This airbase hospital was mostly used by American soldiers during the Second World War. As you can imagine, it wasn't a very jolly place to go visit back then. Most of the people who were taken to this hospital were either injured in combat or suffering from some terrible sickness that occurred while they were in the Filipino jungles. That's the problem with waging war on unfamiliar grounds. You can get attacked by things you never expected. There's a lot of troops who died in agony in this hospital, and as you can imagine, a death in suffering brings with it a lot of ghosts. Shadow figures have been seen walking through the halls, and it's very normal to hear the sounds of someone weeping when no one else is around. Coming in number 8, we have Malinta Tunnel, Corregidor. I'm giving you back-to-back hospitals on this one. Why? Because they're a hot spot for ghosts, you silly goose. And just so we're clear, this was a tunnel that was turned into a hospital. Well, not so much a hospital, but a sick bay for injured American troops. And as you can imagine, there has been a lot of people who have died there. The area is now famous for ghostly figures walking around at night. They probably don't even know that they're dead, so it's safe to say that this tunnel isn't somewhere you want to get stuck after the sun goes down. Coming in at number 7, we have Manila City City Hall. You know your country has some good spooky stuff when the City Hall is infested with ghosts. That's cool as hell. Well, apparently this place is packed with ghosts and they show up like clockwork. As soon as the sun starts going down, spooky stuff will start to pop up all over the building. You get all the standard ghost stuff going on here. People say there's footsteps coming from floors that have no people on them. You can hear whispering coming out of thin air. There's even reports of doors bursting open randomly. I mean, if you're going to be a ghost, you could at least be polite and not slam any of the doors. Thank you very much. Coming in at number 6, we have Mount Maja-Az. This island is haunted by a ton of stuff that is outside the world of ghosts, but is still very supernatural. Apparently this place has everything mystical going on over there. There have been reports of dwarves and elves on the island that are apparently really nice. If you come to the island with good intentions, then they will bless you with good luck. But if you come over there with some bad vibes, they will send you a ton of bad mojo that will ruin your whole life. Now there is something over there that is pretty creepy and would keep me away from this island even though they're supposed to be good luck giving dwarves. Apparently this place is also home to some vampires that roam the island looking for new victims to suck the life out of. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a hot vacation spot for me. Coming in number 5, we have Baja Nepula San Ildefonso Bulacan. This is another place that the Japanese used as a garrison while they were waging war. And I don't know if you know this about the Japanese, but even though they seem cute and cuddly now, they weren't always like that. The Japanese used to be brutal. They would try to completely eradicate other cultures, and they saw themselves as the superior Asian race. All others were disposable, and the way they treated the Filipino people was horrible. At Baja Nepula, many people were beaten, tortured, and even The place has such a horrible history that the building has been abandoned ever since, and no one will go close to it. It's said that it has a horrible curse on it. Coming in at number 4, we have Herrera Mansion, Quezon. Now we're moving to a place that has a couple of famous ghosts. It's one thing to have a haunted attraction that has some voices and screams coming out of it, or has stories of people feeling cold spots, but actually seeing the same ghost over and over, that's something you can sell tickets to. Apparently there is a ghost of a Japanese soldier that will wander the property. He sometimes yells out or vanishes and then reappears in an instant. I mean, that's kind of spooky, but I've got a little added bonus that will make the whole thing a lot spookier. The ghost is headless. Yeah, that's exactly what you need to give this place a little extra spooky vibe. Now, even though our headless soldier is the star of the show, there's another set of ghosts that have been seen quite often. There's a ghost couple that has been seen walking around hand in hand around the building. It's thought that they could be the original owners of the building. Coming in at number 3, we have Balete Drive, one of the most famous kinds of hauntings you can have, the Lady in White. There's a house on Balete Drive that is apparently home to a lady in white. She loves to watch people as they walk by and apparently doesn't like men very much. This could be because it's suspected that she was killed by Japanese soldiers. If you're a man driving by the Lady in White's home, she might use her supernatural powers to teleport into your backseat, and when you look into your rearview mirror, you will see her staring back at you with her body drenched in blood. Hopefully she doesn't leave a blood stain on the new leather. Coming in at number 2, we have Diplomat Hotel by Guyo. It's safe to say that the events that took place at the Diplomat Hotel were not very diplomatic. I would describe them as horrific and unnecessary, but that's just me. This hotel was a hotspot for executions. This is a place where many nuns and priests were rounded up in an attempt to destroy Catholicism in the Philippines. These nuns and priests were executed in front of everyone, and their heads were then kicked down the steps. Major disrespect on so many levels. Well, when you cut off the heads of that many people, then you're going to anger some ghosts. There's a ton of spirits that call this place home, and many of them are headless. There's so many headless ghosts at this place they don't even have one superstar. They all work together as one major attraction.
In our number 9 spot today we have Xunantunich. This location sits deep in the jungles of Belize, located less than a mile from the border of Guatemala. It has an unbelievably rich history as it is an ancient Maya ruin that has been abandoned for the last 1,000 years. In 1890 this site had its modern discovery, and since then it has been an important site for archaeology, an amazing tourist attraction, but also it is said to be a hotspot for the paranormal. It is said that the site is haunted by a female ghost. She has black hair and glowing red eyes. Referred to as the Stone Lady, it is said that she was first spotted by one of the first research teams in the area in 1893, and since then she has been frequently seen by the tallest building complex called El Castillo. No one exactly knows the story behind the stone lady considering the history of this site, but many believe she may have been a part of a ritual sacrifice, which was a tradition and spiritual practice done by the ancient Maya civilization. In our number 8 spot today we have Burg Eltz. This German castle dates back to 1157, so it's no surprise that there are many myths and legends surrounding it. The most common tale is that of a young countess named Agnes. Agnes was betrothed or promised to another noble, but after meeting him, she called off their future wedding. Apparently this guy was the worst, and also even if he wasn't, no one could really blame her for calling off a wedding she didn't want to have. But of course, things quickly went awry. This noble guy was mad that she had rejected him, so the scorned lover laid siege to the castle. Agnes fought to defend her home, but she passed away during the battle. That is the story behind why her spirit is said to haunt the Burg Eltz castle. Many say the strongest presence is felt in her former bedroom. It is said that her spirit is quite mournful, and apparently her battle armor and axe remain on display as well. In our number 7 spot today we have the Eden Brown Estate. This estate is located in Nevis, which is the smaller of the 2 islands that comprise the nation of St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean. It is said that despite having just as much to offer, Nevis is often overshadowed by St. Kitts. That is, until people hear of this ghostly haunting. Eden Brown Estate is a former plantation that now lies in ruin. The estate was once owned by a businessman who was going to give the property to his daughter as a wedding present. Legend goes that on the wedding day there was a very mysterious duel between the groom and his best man that ended up leaving both of the men dead. Because of this tragic happening on what should have been her wedding day, the businessman's daughter remained unmarried and alone for the rest of her life, which meant that when she passed, there was no one to leave the estate to. Now visitors of the estate report seeing the spirit of a reclusive woman as she roams about the grounds. Aside from this story, who knows what other kind of horrors and absolute tragedies that this place has seen. In our number 6 spot today we have Bangar Fort. Bangar Fort is located in India just 100 miles southwest of Delhi. This place is pretty much completely abandoned as it is said to have had a curse placed on it. Apparently many years ago a sorcerer tried to woo a local princess, in which she rejected him. He got so upset that he decided that cursing this town was his only course of action. I just have to mention that none of these are a normal reaction to being rejected, and calling it an overreaction would honestly be an understatement. This fort now is closed to visitors after sundown because of all the spooky happenings that go on here. This fort is extremely beautiful, so it's no wonder the paranormal doesn't keep people out. People have reported having extremely strong feelings of an otherworldly presence, and even some have reported hearing voices that are seemingly coming from nowhere. In our number 5 spot today we have the Whaley House. The Whaley House is located in San Diego and it was built in 1857. The site that this family house was built on was actually the location of San Diego's first public gallows, so as you can imagine, that's a pretty good backstory for a haunted site. Right after moving in, Thomas Whaley reported that he could hear the footsteps of Yankee Jim Robinson, who had been hanged at the gallows just 4 short years before the house was built. After moving in, the Whaley family began to experience a bunch of family tragedies, many of which actually happened inside of the house. The Whaley House is now a museum, and apparently the family members continue to haunt the site. These paranormal occurrences are apparently often accompanied by the smells of cigar smoke and heavy perfumes. In our number 4 spot today we have Obvodny Canal. Obvodny Canal is located in St. Petersburg, Russia, and this whole thing just really creeps me out. This man-made canal was built in the late 18th century, and ever since then there has been extremely strange occurrences at this location. Construction workers would complain of headaches. They would also sometimes even have random outbursts of violent behavior that was uncharacteristic of them, but the craziest, most unsettling part is what has given this location full cursed status. Many of these people have attempted to take their own lives. Sadly, most of the attempts were successful, but the few people who have been saved have explained that they have no idea why they did it. They say that they didn't really have intentions beforehand, and some have even said that they felt some sort of invisible force pulling them into the water. Apparently there are some sinister souls that live beneath the surface of the water, and there have even been reports of seeing a lady in white in the water before she suddenly disappears. Long story short, remind me to just never ever go here. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Eastern State Penitentiary. The Eastern State Penitentiary is located in Philadelphia, and of course it used to be a prison, but it is now an abandoned and extremely haunted house. This prison used to house some pretty big profile prisoners such as Al Capone and Willie Sutton, but it was different from the American prisons we are used to now. This is because this prison was entirely separate incarceration. The inmates would live, sleep, eat, and everything else alone. When they were removed from their cells, they would have hoods placed over their heads as well. Considering all we now know about how detrimental isolation is, this of course must have taken an immense toll on the prisoners. Beside this, there were also some pretty gruesome and horrible punishments in this prison, such as having prisoners' tongues chained to their wrists. I'm honestly not even sure how you would do that, but apparently it was a thing. This prison now sees thousands of voluntary visitors every year, and there have been plenty of reports of some creepy paranormal happenings. These reports include seeing shadowy figures, hearing creepy laughter that doesn't belong to anyone living, and hearing footsteps throughout the prison. I feel like considering all that went on when this prison was active, it truly does make sense that this building would be a haunted one. In our number 2 spot today, we have Raynham Hall. Raynham Hall is located in England and was built around 1620, and it is a large building on 7,000 acres, which is obviously quite impressive. The tale that follows this haunted building is that of Lady Dorothy Dolly Townsend and her husband Viscount Turnip Townsend. I can't believe a couple with the nicknames Dolly and Turnip have an evil history, but unfortunately, they do. The story goes that Turnip kept Dolly locked up in the house, which is obviously just terrible and very cruel. After her passing, it's no wonder she decided to stick around and haunt the house. Apparently, there was a photo taken of her ghost in 1930, and it is said that no one has ever been able to prove it was a fake, so all you photo experts out there, take a look and let me know what you think. A lot of the places on this list now serve as haunted houses, but apparently this one is still lived in by the Raynham family. Hence the name. In our number 1 spot today, we have Forsyth Park. One thing I didn't know is that apparently the entire city of Savannah, Georgia is a pretty haunted place due to the creepy tunnels that are located underneath the city. But one of the most notable, highly haunted places within the city is Forsyth Park. Apparently there used to be a hospital across the street, and there would be autopsies performed in the tunnels below the park. I personally feel like autopsies are already creepy enough, so I'm not sure if conducting them in an underground tunnel was exceptionally necessary, but hey, I can't change the past. Because of this scary practice, the park has seen a lot of paranormal activity since these days, and it usually is the sort of place where 1 second you'll see a strange figure, but as soon as you blink or look away, it disappears just as quickly as it suddenly appeared.